You've been wrong.
You're trying to turn this. You're trying to turn this.
You've been wrong.
No, you're trying to turn this into debate. There are business people. There are business
You're wrong.
people.
You've been wrong. You've been wrong all your life on this stuff.
The great John Carney is here, Breitbart Business Editor. John, how you doing, brother?
Very good. What an unflappable performance by Donald Trump at that Chicago meeting yesterday.
The Economic Club of Chicago, moderated there by the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg. Is Trump right? Is this editor-in-chief of Bloomberg always wrong about everything all the time?
He has been wrong about tariffs his entire life. I mean, Trump is right about that. He came from The Economist. He has been at Bloomberg, and he believes a lot of myths about tariffs that, frankly, we proved untrue during the Trump administration. Trump has this great advantage going into this election. Last time around, when he said he wanted tariffs, people could, scream about the sky falling. Well, we put on tariffs. Not only did we put them on during the Trump administration, but Joe Biden kept them on, and the sky didn't fall. So I have to say, Trump, it's a weapon that, almost no president has ever had before when running for president again, because that almost has never happened, which is that he has a record he can point to. He did it before. It worked. So the idea that we're going to have a trade war that will destroy the economy just because you raised tariffs didn't pan out last time. And so Trump can say you've been wrong.
So this is an hour-long conversation. A lot of it was about tariffs. And Trump articulated the difference between a 10% tariff, a 50% tariff, and a 100% tariff, and the different ways to use this tool of tariff. And I think the most interesting one is the 50% tariff, which is the, hey, we're going to put a big tariff on you, and it's going to be so horrible for you that you are now strongly incentivized to open up a factory in America. And the guy's response wasn't, that never happens, or that will never happen, or that can't happen. His response was, that takes a long time, which I thought was an interesting rebuttal from this expert. What do you make of that pipe dream by Donald Trump?
I think what it reveals is that Donald Trump is looking at tariffs as an important policy tool and a negotiating tool. What he's presenting is the idea that we will come to the table with the rest of the world and say, look, the United States market, our consumers have been supporting the rest of the world's economy basically since World War II, and that we've decided that we're not going to do this anymore. It began, frankly, as a way of rebuilding Europe and Asia following World War II as a Cold War policy. We wanted to, at a cost to our manufacturing, to rebuild the rest of the world. Well, we did it. We won. We not only won the Cold War, but we rebuilt the rest of the world. This has been fantastic for the rest of the world. What we're saying is now that period is over, and that we are going to have a new regime. But you won't get there. Nobody will believe you if you just say, hey, please be more fair to us, right? That's not going to work. You have to say, all right, the table stakes are 10%, maybe 20% tariffs. That's what we're coming to the table with. If you can present us with a fairer trading regime where our goods can be sold into your markets just like yours are sold into ours, then maybe you won't get any tariff at all. If you can't do that, then we're going to raise the tariffs beyond 20%, go as high as 50%, so that if you do want to sell into our market, you have to build the stuff here. That, I think, is a very reasonable approach, and one that shows a lot of flexibility. Trump isn't saying, like, that's it, there's this, tariff of X percent, and that's all it's going to be. He's saying it will be flexible. It will depend on the way other countries react to our negotiation.
Okay. How is this different than the Smoot-Hawley tariffs that Hoover signed that many conservatives have said ushered into the Great Depression?
Right. Well, so first of all, I'm just going to say the Smoot-Hawley tariff had nothing to do with the Great Depression at all. The problem with the Great Depression was not that tariffs made imports more expensive. If anybody tells you that the Smoot-Hawley tariff caused the Great Depression, you have to ask them, was the Great Depression the period where things became very expensive? That was not the Great Depression. The Great Depression actually had serious deflation. Things were so cheap that it didn't even make sense to make them anymore. That the problem was not tariffs at all. The rest of the world also imposed tariffs. That probably contributed to the global Great Depression that we had. But those very likely were not a reaction to the Smoot-Hawley tariff, but actually a product of the same thing, which was the rest of the world was becoming more protectionist at the time. But notice what Trump's doing. Trump isn't trying to say he wants to protect domestic manufacturing companies from foreign competition at all. He's actually inviting foreign competition as long as they make it in the U.S. So this is different than the sort of imaginary, but sometimes real tariffs of the past, where they could be put in place to protect a domestic monopolist. He's saying, actually, I'm going to invite foreign competition into the U.S. They just have to employ Americans in order to compete.
We threw you in the middle of a bit of a storm here because we were talking about Logansport, Indiana. So Logansport is the new Springfield, Ohio, and the new Aurora, Colorado. Logansport, Indiana, local news did a story of this town, 18,000 people, where there are 27 different languages spoken at the school. And the whole thing, right? And I'm like, hold on, what Logansport? Why are there so many Haitians and all these other people from 87 different countries, 27 different countries in Logansport? And it turns out there's a Tyson chicken plant in Logansport. I'm like, okay. And I found this Bloomberg article about Tyson and how 1/3 of their workforce, 42,000 people, are these foreign workers. And they work with this nonprofit, which is founded by the yogurt people, Chobani Yogurt, called Tent Partnership for Refugees. And you go to tent.org, and they're proudly right in the front page talking about how they connect refugees from all over the world, and many, they're all over the world, or they're in New York now from all over the world, to Logansport and all the Tyson chicken factories. So we talked about a million different things here. Let me go to the one that I need your most expertise on, and that is, if we make it illegal for Tyson, we stop all this nonsense with Tyson, and Tyson has to hire 40,000 Americans to debone chicken on the factory line. And you can't pay $16.50, which is what they pay these immigrants right now. You have to pay $25 an hour in order to get the Americans to work. How much will the price of chicken go up?
I don't think the price of chicken goes up one dang cent. I think what happens is that the Tyson chicken will actually be forced to accept a lower level of profitability. Maybe over a long period of time, which nobody will notice, the price of chicken might go up. But look, the company is doing this not to hold down prices. If you think companies hire cheap labor because they want to charge less, I would like to sell you a bridge in Brooklyn. This is not actually what happens. They do it in order to increase their profits. Look, these things, some of them may have begun in a charitable way. People said, okay, well, there are people who have, there's a national crisis somewhere out there in the world. We're going to accept some refugees. Let's find a way for them to get jobs. But eventually, and they often become scams in which you have pressure on the government to accept more refugees in order to provide cheap labor to companies like Tyson. I don't know whether the Chobani company also employs cheap labor. But what I would say is that it is unhealthy, not just economically, but at a political level, to create a subservient labor class in America. We tried to get away from that. America was founded on an ideal of equality, but we did have a subservient slave labor class. We have been trying to move away from that since our founding, recreating the situation in which you have people who can't vote because they're refugees, who basically can't ask for more money because they are afraid that they will be deported if they don't keep their jobs. and a subservient, quiescent labor class is a disaster politically, socially, and economically for America. And when we see it developing, we need to nip it in the bud.
Wow, what a really, really good way of putting that. A subservient labor class. Yeah, that's right. Living, 20 people to a house, et cetera. And we just look back and we're like, oh, well, the chicken's cheaper or something. But to your point, you don't think it is. Now, but isn't it good for Tyson
was cheaper
to...
when we could pick it with slaves? I just find the idea that we allow people to live in terrible conditions that here's how I think we should think about immigration into America. Everybody who comes into America should be somebody who we want to be a fellow American. So if we're bringing people in just to have cheap labor who live in labor camps, let's just call them plantations, okay? If we are bringing people in to put into the labor plantation of Tyson chicken, that's un-American. I reject that. I do not want an economy and a society. I am an abolitionist when it comes to this, and I think that we need to have an America that looks at everybody who lives here as an equal share American. That's our goal with our society, with our country. That is what we talked about in the Declaration of Independence, and that's what we should be doing.
I like that framing a lot. I got 1 minute. Isn't it good for Tyson to increase profit?
It is. I welcome them to increase profit, but not at the cost that we were just discussing. Go for profit. Maybe, by the way, one of the ways that this will be done is to mechanize it. Look, countries that don't have big immigration still manage to eat chicken. How do they do this? It's largely because they mechanize, they innovate. One of the things that has happened is we have actually held back innovation in a lot of our food supply because instead we have allowed the importation of cheap labor.